This video will discuss coral and invert quarantine.
Why should I quarantine corals and inverts? Looking over the list shown here, the common denominator is any hard surface that parasite tomotes can insist or adhere to. Parasite tomotes are basically the egg stage of ick and velvet. This is what happens after parasites drop off of a fish and start looking for a hard surface to insist upon and continue their life cycle. After tomotes have formed, they will eventually begin releasing free swimmers into the water which seek out and infect fish. While tomotes cannot insist to live coral tissue, any hard part of a coral or invert is fair game. Think about the rocky base of almost any LPS coral, or that small rock or plug that the coral is attached to, or even snail and hermit crab shells. So what can be done about this? I'd also like to point out that another reason for coral quarantine is to keep coral-specific pests out of your display tank. These include Aiptasia, bubble algae, dinoflagellates, flatworms, AEFW, Monty-eating nudibranchs, vermitid snails, and the list just goes on and on. You also want to keep out any unwanted hitchhikers from your display tank. While coral dips will eliminate some of these threats, none are 100% effective. So observing for pests, hitchhikers, and nuisance algae in a quarantine tank is the only way to protect your display tank investment.
So, the first thing you will need to do is set up a coral and invert quarantine tank. This can be a miniature version of your display tank with sump, reactors, controllers, and all, or something more simple like what you see here. I just used cheap T5 lighting, a Corellia power head, a hang-on back power filter, heater, rock, sand, and a frag rack to get the job done. You can also add a hang-on back protein skimmer if needing to remove more nutrients from the water. Here's another configuration I have used in the past. You'll notice there are no fish. This is very important to starve out any parasite tomotes because the free swimmers they release will die without fish to feed on, thus ending the life cycle. I will discuss this further in just a few minutes. I like to make use of a frag rack to separate frags meant for my display tank from soft corals I like to keep below for filtration purposes. This protects these frags from stalks of xenia or mushrooms that might inadvertently attach to them.
So now that you have the coral quarantine tank set up, you are probably wondering, how long do I need to isolate the animals to a fishless environment? The information shown here was mostly derived from Dr. Peter Burgess's 1992 thesis regarding cryptocaryon attachment and cyst development on corals and inverts. It is very important that the water temperature of your coral invert quarantine tank be at least 80.6 Fahrenheit at all times, because warmer water speeds up the life cycle of most waterborne parasites. Starting at the top, you'll notice that soft corals with no base, starfish, and sea urchins all require no quarantine. However, I would still pour display tank water over these and into a bucket to be discarded, just in case any parasite-free swimmers happen to be loosely attached. Anemones and all macroalgae only require a 16-day quarantine period. All other corals and inverts require a 45-day quarantine unless otherwise noted in the footnotes. So let's review. A coral invert QT can be a miniature version of your DT or something much simpler and less expensive. An all-in-one nano tank is usually a good choice. The intensity of lighting, water quality, and flow will greatly depend upon what type of corals you are needing to quarantine. In general, SPS requires stronger lighting, more flow, and less nutrients than most other corals. The optimal temperature to quarantine corals and inverts at is 27 Celsius, 80.6 Fahrenheit. This is to shorten the life cycle of marine ick and velvet. Isolate corals and inverts to a fishless environment at this temperature for 45 days in most cases. The only exceptions are listed in the footnotes of the previous slide. Don't forget to supplement feed your animals in quarantine, as there will be no fish food or their poop to provide nutrients for them. It's always a good idea to give corals a coral dip both before entering quarantine and before being added to the display tank.
Thank you for watching this video. See links in the comments section for more detailed information, and join us on my forum for all reef aquarium related discussion.